Develop your skills. Exercise 4, Development 06. Use insert function. There's a couple of ways to put functions into a worksheet or to get the cell that you want, calculating the numbers you want, and it's all a question of which way you want to enter the function and what you're most comfortable with. Sometimes directly typing in the function is best, sometimes selecting it from a function library is best, and sometimes just going to the insert function option to find what you need and then help you work through the function is the best way. Let's go through the insert function method now. Open up the workbook from the previous lesson. You should be on the QTR1 Commissions tab down here, and it should be the Commissions workbook. We're going to fill these guys in, and when we come over here, we're going to select C12, and we're going to click the Insert Function command. For those of you who remember the math as you are leaving high school and or entering college, f of x is the function of x, and that's this button here, Insert Function. When we click right there, it's going to open up the Insert Function window, and here's how we select these. Typically, you're going to use Select a Category. Most recently used are just things that I've done. All functions, financial functions, things like interest or different days for days to recoup money. Math and trig are just going to be that cosine, sine, tangent, math, and trigonometry. Logical functions will be those if, and, or functions. In this case, what we are looking for is a very simple function. We're looking for max, and we can do this two ways. First, we can type max up here and just click go, and it will find functions and automatically change to recommended here. We can also, if we're in any group of functions, we can just start typing max, and hey, what do you know? There we are. Search here, select it from a subgroup, or just type in directly when you have this window selected, and it will look through all the different categories to find what you're after. In this case, we just click max, and we can either double-click max or click max and click OK. And then it will jump directly to the function arguments window. The function arguments window, until you've had a pretty good amount of experience or you're very experienced with multiple types of functions, you're always going to want to work in the function arguments window, and here's why. It tells you what you need, that's the bold number 1. It tells you what you can have, the number 2, and if I add more, number 3 or number 4. And then it also gives you reminders. Now, number 1 is just, it's telling you, this is just the first number that we're going to consider the max for, the first range of numbers. That's pretty self-explanatory. But later, when we get to more complicated functions, you may not always remember what the pdiff is in a function, and you may want to say, great, what was that again? As you go through the function arguments window, it tells you in bold what's needed, in non-bold what can also be considered but is not required. It defines these things, and it gives you a preview of the formula. Work with the function arguments window whenever you can on these, and consider before we click OK. The book tells us, just to simply straightforward select the range C5 through C8. Consider this, we're looking for the maximum of a group of numbers between C5 and C8. Makes a little more sense when you say it that way. You can just click to select a group of numbers. You'll notice the function arguments window over here shrinks up. And if I start highlighting things, the actual function here is automatically updating. What you can also do is click this little red, white, and blue button here, the little red arrow on the blue and white background. That's called the collapse button, and it shrinks the box and lets us click on and select or bring up any group of data, and it will automatically find it for us. In this case, we just need C5 through C8. Once we have C5 through C8, it's going to return a value of 486, which, as you can see in these 4 numbers, 486 is here. We click OK, and we're good to go. Now, simply using the fill handle to stretch this out across, 502, yep. Of these 4 numbers, 502 is the largest, and 1229. Of those 4 numbers, 1229 is the largest. We have effectively found the maximum number for each thing with the fill handle, and we were able to use the function arguments window to get there. That's the handy thing about the function arguments. It can guide you to the function you need. In this one, going for the minimum number, pretty straightforward. What we're going to do is click function arguments. Under all functions, the way I usually do these, if you want the real life example, the way I prefer it is just to start typing the first 3 or 4 letters, min, minimum, returns the smallest number. What do you know? Click OK. Tell it exactly which group you want, because you'll notice that by default it selects all of the data above or to the left until there's a break in the numbers. So by default it's only going to want C11 and C12, but we don't want the minimum of the average of the maximum. If the average and the maximum were considered, we would always get the average, because the average is always going to be less than just the biggest number in a set. Got to remember to manually select the numbers we want the minimum from, and of these 4 numbers, you can see over here in formula result we're going to get 88. Right on, this looks like what we want. It's easier in this set to kind of eyeball it. 101 is the smallest number in these 4. 263 is the smallest number in these 4. If we were working with an enormous data chunk of 30,000 entries of data, this function would still work just as fast, and we would not be able to eyeball the 4 numbers and the 30,000 numbers in the same way. As you use these functions, remember that even though it's really easy to just eyeball this, try to make sure that you're eyeballing it to check your work, and you're actually putting the function through to really learn what it's going for. Last but not least, we'll put this one in. F of x, just type count, go. There we are, count. Counts the number of cells in a range. Don't confuse count with counting the numbers. That's a sum. The sum is all the numbers in a group added together. We want to count the number of numbers. It's 4. There are 4 numbers in these 4 cells. If one of these cells were empty, it would return 3. There would be 3 numbers entered into 4 cells. Again, very, very simple to eyeball and see that there are 4 numbers in a sheet with 30,000 entries, and anywhere from 1 to 10,000 empty cells. This becomes very valuable. Remember to select C5 through C8, because we don't want the lowest number, or we don't want the number of 3 cells, we want the number of these 4 specific. It'll give us 4, we click OK. Don't type it in again and again and again, just use the fill handle, and there we are. It's usually pretty easy to eyeball these guys to check the work in this smaller sheet to make sure you've entered them in correctly. Is this the average of these 4 numbers? Well, the cool part is that we can look down here at the bottom of the sheet and see, yes, of these 4 numbers, 264.75 is the average. That's the correct number there. Is this the maximum? In that set, yes it is. Is this the minimum? In that set, yes it is. And last but not least, are there 4 numbers? Yes, there are. As you go through these, remember, the best thing is to try, right before you click OK, or you hit Enter, you hit Tab, and you confirm that function, best thing to try to do is to try to predict the answer. See if you can understand where this is going, even before you get the answer and check it in the book. It's easy to follow the book's instructions, but you want to make sure that you're understanding where the numbers are coming from, where they're going, and that you know what you're asking Excel, so when you're off the book, and when you need to use it, you've got that information there, and you have a better understanding of what's under the hood, the mechanics of the functions.